We're excited to kick off our panel on climate solutions, and joining on the panel is Dr. Pasi Vainikka, CEO of Solar Foods.
Happy to be here.
All right. So if you give us an overview of Solar Foods, that would be great.
What we are doing, we are bringing to the market a completely new kind of food, new harvest for the humankind, completely new species, a natural species that we grow with a technology called gas fermentation. Maybe I can explain that a little later. The key thing of why to do all this is we can disconnect food production from agriculture by growing the organism with hydrogen and carbon dioxide instead of using, for example, sunlight and sugars. And this gives many strategic advantages.
It's really mind-boggling, and I think in my opening keynote I mentioned that you don't need the use of land, you don't need sunlight, all the things that we typically think of for growing, food, and particularly protein. It's not applicable, including cells and labs. So, can you go into a little bit more depth around the approach and why it's more sustainable and scalable than any other potential protein options that are out there?
Yeah, the key thing is that we have an organism that is nutritionally, broadly speaking, close to meat, dried soy, and some hints of carrot, if you like, because of high content of vitamin A. And this is a natural 2 micrometer size non-modified organism. And growing this through gas fermentation, you need electricity and air, and that's 95% of the story. You need some minerals also in the growth media. But through this technology, then basically you can literally go in the middle of Arctic, in the middle of desert, as long as you have access to electricity to produce food. And the key is, and the drivers basically are not due to us. We know the crisis on the food system because of the climate change, loss of natural habitat, and so on. But we saw it coming back at the days at the Research Institute, where our founding team comes from. We saw that solar and wind will become very cheap. And then the next question for us, almost a decade ago, was that what's the best use of this electricity, or high value, high impact product to turn this electricity to? And we thought that food and protein might be one. So because of this disconnection, using electricity, cheap electricity, it empowers the process. You can scale and literally go anywhere, even in space, to produce.
I mean, this is profound. I mean, I think for some of those that are watching or listening, I have a sense that they're probably still trying to grasp the concept here, because you're literally, it feels like you're creating something out of nothing. But yet what you're saying is that because the levelized cost of solar and wind has come down so much, that's actually becoming cheaper than oil and gas, that you can actually have clean energy. And regardless of the regions that are affected by drought, regions that are affected by floods or hurricanes or any type of natural disasters, that you could still, without livestock, without a lab, you can actually start to have real pure protein that can be used as an ingredient in food production. And that is really mind-boggling. And I wonder, for your organization, is the story resonating with people? Are they getting it, or does it feel like magic?
Yeah, it feels like magic for people, but when you see it, when you can see real foods produced from the ingredient, people get it immediately. Also, what we are trying to do is to be extremely transparent. So we provide videos, we provide material online, and try to explain the future for people. And then again, when you start that ingredient seed to come live, it's not that difficult actually, and the process all in all is quite simple how to produce it.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, from a science perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Now, one question you mentioned, a point that you mentioned was that this could also be applicable in space. And certainly, of course, growing food in space is going to be one of the biggest challenges we have. This particular bacteria, what conditions does it need to have in order to survive, such as in space?
basically it's the same conditions as you have on Earth, because the microbe lives in a body of water. It's in fermenter that is filled with water, some minerals, and the gases, hydrogen, some oxygen, and carbon dioxide. Therefore, all you need during the mission is to kind of recharge or drive the system with electricity, and that is what you have available through solar panels.
And some of this can be dry. So in other words, let's say you wanted to, take this to Mars, for instance. Could you have it in dry form and then reconstitute it in such a way to then, go through the biotech process?
Yeah, what you can do is of course, do some production during flight or at the destination. The key problem is the loss of nutritional value of food during long storage time. Shelf life for food is not that good if you take it to years and years in what comes to vitamins. So producing locally is important. So you do need to launch the devices, let's say to Mars, and that's definitely some payload. But then again, the idea is to recirculate everything at the destination, so that no more packed food is needed.
Can you talk about some of the patent portfolio and how you guys are protecting your know-how and also the trade secrets aspects? And then talk a little bit about the product roadmap, where things are in terms of current development and some of the next near-term milestones.
Yeah, so we do have more than a dozen patent families on what has to do with the fermenter technology, also downstream how to convert the powder ingredient into so that it gains structure, utilize structures, meat alternatives, and so on. So there are these things, but I would say still the key IP, of course, there's the organism itself, what we are using, which is very specific thing, proprietary stuff. But after all these patents, I would say the key IP, what such company that applies to us and all those other companies who are getting to the market with new ingredients, is novel food approval. So that's the license to sell. And we filed a dossier in the European Union, working across US and elsewhere on the planet as well. We really look forward to, maybe not in a very distant future, to hear positive news on the regulatory approval and actually go to market quite soon, surprisingly soon. So that's the key IP to knowledge and skill to screen for new organisms, maybe modify and take that through scaling of production and proving its functionality and getting it legally approved. So that's the whole chain. Is the key kind of IP in a way what you have. And we are going to market next year during 2023. We are building our first commercial factory 01, as we call it, 8 minutes from Helsinki Airport in Finland. And it will produce halfway 23, about 100 tons of single cell protein that we call Solein per year.
Well, it's just very exciting, and certainly we're anxiously waiting about the filing and the approval process. Let's talk a little bit about the functionality and the characteristics of the protein powder. When you compare it to other protein ingredients, whether made from soy, lemma, or duckweed, or something else, how does it stack up, and is it really as useful compared to some of the others?
I would say there are two specific or three specific areas I would categorize the alternative protein space: functionality, texture. Of course, cell-based meat is one specific thing. Then there are acellular products, so those proteins and molecules that microbes express. Let's say milk without cow, egg without chicken. It's very specific, identical molecules, proteins that you find in the animal products. And then they have the identical functionalities, whether it's foaming or solubility and so on. We are similar broadly speaking, to comparing to plant-based ingredients and its functionality. So if you say soy or pea protein, in terms of functionality, it's pretty much there what you can do with Solein.
And then as you look at your pro forma and some of the scaling projections in terms of relative costs, and then assuming that it's equivalent to a lot of the plant-based protein ingredient, what's the cost structure looking like, and where do you guys stack up?
Yeah, ultimately, putting a bit shortcut, one third to half of the production cost will be electricity, your electricity bill. So that's key. And also based on that, you could say that in a longer future, you could see these factories locating where there is cheap electricity available, or there's capability to pay. So also there are many areas of the planet where there is no arable land. So food security is also a key topic.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to the question I was asking is that a lot of the cost aspects is going to really depend on scaling. So the first factory in Helsinki is going to be that proving ground. But as the capacity grows, both kind of domestically, but also eventually regionally and throughout the globe, and that scaling is really where the opportunities for the price to come down. Now, you make a good point that a big part of the cost structure is really clean energy. So the better that you can actually source that clean energy, the cheaper the overall cost structure is going to be. Now, in terms of the kind of the grander, bigger plan around scaling, how do you foresee this being potentially transplanted to places like in the Middle East, places that has been adversely affected by natural disasters, and in a way that it's affecting their agricultural output?
Those events, they make you to think. It gives you a perspective and prioritize things typically, and makes you also consider that if you think of we as humankind and the past decades, let's say after Second World War. It's been the big thing has been globalization. The world has really opened, and people and stuff travel, and the logistic chains are longer. On a planet level, of course, that might be providing you the ultimate efficiency. But then again, broken logistics is a theme that might be gaining a new level of importance. And then through that local production, if it's possible, it might be that there's interest and capability to pay. So far in food and energy, it's been quite unfair for those who don't have, for example, coal, gas, and oil resources. So you need to import, not much choices, right? So what's the dialogue between you and an oil company when you refill your petrol engine car? Not much. But with technology, solar, wind energy, and batteries, electric vehicles, they empower the individual, can provide some independence. And now the same is happening in food system. New technologies, quite interestingly, provide you grounds to actually grow food wherever you want. And if that's possible, then new futures open.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Now, how are you working with different partners and customers to create a final product? So I know, again, you guys are providing the powder protein aspect, but what final form factors have you guys actually experimented with, and what do you foresee that this could become in terms of end products?
Yeah, we have quite interesting material transfer setup with globally leading players, I'm encouraged to say, geographically spread, and also what comes to food categories, whether it's meat alternatives, takeaway, snacks, and dairy products, and some refreshment categories as well. So we do have customers or candidate customers in these categories, all continents basically, that with whom we are having a dialogue, who are testing our ingredient, proving its functionality. And it seems to be like that in this business, that the dialogue starts in a customer relationship by providing a sample, test yourself, how it works in whatever your yogurt you're doing. That's where we are now. We can kind of provide these small samples and getting the traction and momentum towards then customers for the larger production facilities.
And I wonder for those customers, because of course they're also sourcing other alternatives as well. What's the kind of the compelling aspects of why they're choosing to experiment or test out your product?
Well, one is that broadly speaking, if we think of the alternative protein space, including plant-based, you could say that its volume base is more than 70% soy, even more than that soy. So what are the alternatives for growth without inducing environmental impacts, without imports? What about the security of supply and the stability of quality? So if those are attributes that you want to kind of have controls and transparency to, then new technologies, including ours, can provide this. Companies do have their sustainability goals. So how do you start to work on that? It starts with your ingredients. Of course, then pricing and scalability is also something that brings value. Not to forget, ultimately, taste, convenience, and nutritional value is basically the ultimate decisive factor at the end.
Yeah. In our previous panel, we talked about energy independence, and we're talking about Russia, Ukraine, and how it's important for not just EU and some of the countries to be energy independent from Russia, but also in this context, we're talking about food independence. I mean, you talked about global distribution aspects and the supply chain disruptions. Here, there's an opportunity, whether it's North America, whether it's other parts of Europe, or East Asia, or Southeast Asia, or Africa, or South America, that they have an opportunity to be beef protein independent, and that they can actually have local capacity and not be reliant upon the commodity prices of things that are produced elsewhere. And of course, as adverse climate change continues to impact the yield on things like corn and soy, which are really prevalent crops, it's going to have a huge impact on prices, and we're already feeling it from an inflation as well. As an organization, I believe your entity has raised over some $42 million USD in capital. What's next in terms of the next capital or financing milestone?
Yeah, what we're doing now is that I think we've proven that the ingredient is safe, and that's basically the novel food dossier and its documentation, and waiting for the approval, of course, by the regulatory bodies. Then we have significant production scaling coming, so proving that also on the way. First customers, so of course the first revenues is important, and then the nutritional value and functionality. So it's these 3 or 4 things what you need to prove. After which it's more about then scaling and multiplying the number of fermenters and kind of increasing in terms of revenue. So from a startup, you become then more like a growth company. And for the of course, we have now one ingredient, one species that we are pulling through the chain of things that I explained in the beginning. So from the Petri dish to have regulatory approved and real products out. And our plan is not to leave it there, but rather bring to the market a number of organisms, whether it's non-modified or non-modified, different functionalities and flavors. So basically, this is just the beginning of trying to get the most out of the technology platform, gas, CO2 hydrogen-based technology platform to empower many different kinds of biology. So that development plus equity for future production plant, whether it's on our asset or JV setup. We'll see. But raising equity for these is actually coming in the next 12 months.
Well, that's very exciting about the growing portfolio of organisms, which again is your core IP. We're very excited about that. And of course, we hope that the market really embraces it. One of the things that we look for in startups is unfair advantages. So, one of the things we've seen in Europe in particular is how government and legislation and policies have played a critical role in terms of everything from increasing venture capital into climate and sustainability endeavors and solutions, but also other things specifically around kind of this type of topic. So are you seeing support from the EC or EU? And if so, how? And how is that giving you an unfair advantage?
We do have one specific thing ongoing on the European Commission level, kind of a grand opportunity that we're applying for. Let's see how that will turn out to be. Could be life-changing for us. But broadly speaking, there are these opportunities. There are R&D, demonstration, scaling grants and debts available. That's for sure. For us, food tech, cellular agriculture has not really been the space where this money has flown to. So we might be the first ones pulling through. Let's see, fingers crossed. But in principle, it's there. We do have actually the Finnish government's climate fund, a venture kind of fund of the government, has invested 10 million euros to us. Quite precisely a year ago, and that basically made it clear and was the last funding batch that we needed to be sure that actually there will be our first commercial factory, demo factory. So then it was clear that it will be there. And now we're starting construction year after. But I would say why these things happen here, sustainability, startups and things like that, there's a lot of political signaling ongoing by the main politicians. So the situation awareness is something what people share, and something needs to be done. And this is the space of opportunities.
Well, I want to thank Pasi for a terrific conversation on an innovative approach to solving the protein needs of the world's population and being protein independent as a nation and addressing sustainability. Please give him a round of applause. We're now going to transition to our longevity track to talk about health and well-being.